Judd Nelson went so method during The Breakfast Club that one incident with Molly Ringwald almost got him fired. The Breakfast Club turns 40 years old this week, so here are some things I bet you never knew about it. The story behind The Breakfast Club starts in 1963 when 13-year-old future filmmaker John Hughes moved with his family from Grosse Pointe, Michigan to Northbrook, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. Hughes attended Glenbrook North High School, which would of course be a huge inspiration on his career to come. Hughes had an interest in comedy, and after dropping out of the University of Arizona, he sold some jokes to comedians Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers. He parlayed that experience into a job as an ad agency copywriter. While working on the Virginia Slims account at Leo Burnett, he'd frequently visit New York and got connected with the National Lampoon. Soon he would quit the ad world and become a full-time comedy writer for the Lampoon. In the early 80s, he started writing screenplays under the Lampoon's branding. First, he wrote National Lampoon's Class Reunion, which was a flop, but then he wrote National Lampoon's Vacation, which was a major hit in 1983. He also wrote Mr. Mom that same year and landed a 3-picture deal with Universal. Hughes then wrote 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club in quick succession. But at first, The Breakfast Club was actually called The Lunch Bunch. He changed it after remembering his high school friend who once had a detention class called The Breakfast Club. He set the story at Shermer High School in the fictional Chicago suburb of Shermer. Hughes would explain to Premiere Magazine in 2002 that all of his stories are set in Shermer. Quote, "When I started making movies, I thought I would just invent a town where everything happened. Everybody in all of my movies is from Shermer, Illinois. Del Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles lives 2 doors down from John Bender. Ferris Bueller knew Samantha Baker from 16 Candles." Hughes thought The Breakfast Club would be the perfect film for his directorial debut, so he intentionally kept the cast small and made the setting just one location. That way, the movie wouldn't cost a lot, and the studio could take a risk on him as director. But Universal was more impressed with his writing on 16 Candles, and so they fast-tracked that film instead and let him direct it. 16 Candles shot in the summer of 1983, and it starred Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall. By the time 16 Candles wrapped filming in September 1983, Hughes was already looking ahead to The Breakfast Club, and he asked Ringwald and Hall to join the cast. Hall agreed first and was the first person cast in the movie. His real-life mom and sister ended up playing Brian's mom and sister in the film, and John Hughes himself cameos in the movie as Brian's dad at the end. John Hughes originally wanted Molly Ringwald to play Allison in the movie, which frustrated the actress because she saw herself as Claire. Hughes then held auditions for Claire, and he saw Robin Wright, Jodie Foster, Diane Lane, and Laura Dern. But Molly Ringwald eventually convinced John Hughes and the studio to give her the part, and the role of Allison ultimately went to Ali Sheedy. Emilio Estevez was actually first cast as Bender, and you know what? I could see that. But then Hughes couldn't find someone to play Andrew, and so he shifted Estevez into the role of the jock instead. Only problem was Andrew was written in the script as a football player, but because Estevez was small in stature, Hughes rewrote the character to be a wrestler. Nicolas Cage and Alan Ruck both auditioned for Bender, but it came down to John Cusack and Judd Nelson. Hughes picked Cusack, but then when they were heading into rehearsals, he realized that John Cusack didn't look intimidating enough, so he went with Judd Nelson instead. At the urging of the studio, the original Breakfast Club script included a very raunchy scene in which a male character peeped on the women's swimming coach while she was changing in the locker room. Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy, and producer Michelle Manning found the scene to be a little sexist, and so they petitioned Hughes to cut it from the script. He obliged, and instead came up with the scene involving a janitor, and he hired Rick Moranis to play the role. Rick Moranis is obviously not in the finished movie, but a little bit more on that later. Hughes rehearsed with the cast for 3 weeks prior to filming on location in Illinois, and if the actors wanted to change some dialogue or add something, he was very open to their suggestions. It was Ali Sheedy herself who suggested the movie open with that David Bowie quote. At one point during rehearsals, Judd Nelson almost got himself fired because he stayed in character in between scenes, and he would tease Molly Ringwald, kind of like his character does in the movie. The actress told the New York Times, quote, "Nelson made some sort of blind joke, and my dad was blind." She said that it didn't bother her, but John Hughes was furious about this and he wanted to fire Judd Nelson. The entire cast had to come to Nelson's defense and convince Hughes to keep him in the movie. Costume designer Marilyn Vance put extra effort into getting the costumes just right because each character would only have one costume to wear. But when it came to dressing Ali Sheedy, Vance had a problem. She wanted the character in all black, but this was the 80s and she couldn't find age-appropriate black clothing for the character. As she told the Huffington Post, "I couldn't find anything. Everything was colorful. I don't know if you remember the 80s, but my God, colors were just happening all over the place." And so Vance custom-made most of Ali Sheedy's costume. As I stated earlier, because of its limited cast and one location, The Breakfast Club was pretty low budget for the time. Universal spent just $1 million on the production. Principal photography began on March 28, 1984, at the recently shuttered Maine North High School in Des Plaines, Illinois. The Brutus Design School was first built in 1970 and had closed by 1981. Hughes would later shoot Ferris Bueller inside Maine North as well, and they also shot some of The Breakfast Club in the hallways of Glenbrook North High, John Hughes' alma mater. Anyway, Maine North's library was deemed too small for filming, and so the crew recreated that exact library but bigger in the school's gym. Only problem was with all the lights, it got extremely hot in there. The second floor would reach temperatures of 95 to 110 degrees, and cinematographer Tom Del Ruth told the Huffington Post that the cast and crew would often fall asleep up there because of the heat, and then their snoring would ruin takes. So the film had to hire additional assistant directors to keep people awake upstairs. Because of the singular location, they shot the movie in script order, which is kind of rare. And getting back to Rick Moranis. When it came time to shoot the janitor scenes, Moranis showed up to the set with gold teeth, and he put on a thick Russian accent for the character. That's apparently how he saw the part. After producer Ned Tannen saw the dailies, he screamed at Michelle Manning on the phone, "What the fuck was that?" Moranis' character was way too wacky in comparison to an otherwise grounded and dramatic movie, and so Tannen demanded that Moranis be fired from the film. But Hughes didn't want to do it, so Michelle Manning bit the bullet and fired Rick Moranis. They then cast John Kapelos, who played the fiancé in 16 Candles, and he's who you see in the film as the janitor, minus a Russian accent. The movie didn't always end with Judd Nelson's fist in the air. While filming the final shot, the actor tried a bunch of other things until finally landing on the famous fist pump. Famous photographer Annie Leibovitz shot the iconic poster image toward the end of production. It would go on to influence youth movie marketing and inspire parodies for decades to come. And then filming wrapped on April 29th, 1984, after just 1 month. The Breakfast Club hit theaters on February 15th, 1985. It did $5 million opening weekend, landing at number 3 behind Beverly Hills Cop and Witness, before going on to gross $51 million total worldwide in theaters, which is a huge success against its modest $1 million budget. Most critics liked it, including positive reviews from Siskel and Ebert, while the New York Times called it fraudulent and forced, and Variety panned it for not having anything intelligent to say. But today, 87% of the 112 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. Music was key to the film, especially Simple Minds' song Don't You Forget About Me. The movie's soundtrack hit number 17 on the Billboard charts, while the Simple Minds song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1985. The movie was also key in establishing the Brat Pack, the group of young actors who starred in a number of coming-of-age movies in the 1980s. It wasn't nominated for any major awards, but in 2005, the MTV Movie Awards gave it a silver bucket of excellence. And that's because it grew to have an important and lasting legacy as one of the most cherished movies of the 80s and one of the best teen films of all time. In 2014, Empire named it number 38 on its list of the top 300 movies ever. Likewise, in 2003, the New York Times added it to its unranked list of the top 1,000 movies ever, and in 2010, Entertainment Weekly said it was number 1 in its list of the 50 best high school movies. Film scholar Björn Sonnenberg-Schrank called it the Citizen Kane of the teen film genre. It was parodied in Not Another Teen Movie, of course, and has been referenced by TV shows like Victorious, Riverdale, Abbott Elementary, Community, Dawson's Creek, Cougar Town, How I Met Your Mother, and The Vampire Diaries. Sebastian Stan called Marvel's upcoming Thunderbolts movie, quote, the Breakfast Club of Marvel. The cast has partially reunited a couple times over the years, at the aforementioned VMAs in 2005, and at the Oscars in 2010 after John Hughes' death. John Hughes passed away of a sudden heart attack on August 5th, 2009. But over the years, the cast has revealed that Hughes did have an idea for a Breakfast Club sequel. According to Emilio Estevez and Anthony Michael Hall, Hughes envisioned the characters coming together again in some kind of detainment when they were in their 20s or 30s. But the twist was that they all became the opposite of what they were like in high school. I doubt that's ever going to happen now, 16 years after we lost John Hughes, but that premise does sound kind of amazing, right?